Good evening and welcome to the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting of Thursday, November 21st, 2024. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Soule, please call the roll.
President Pollock.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Gallegos. Here. Trustee Marshazga.
Here.
Trustee Mateo.
Here.
Manager Francis.
Here.
Attorney Pickrell. Here. Also present Clerk Soule.
We have a quorum. First on our agenda is the President's report. I have an update on our street tax levy referendum. The referendum question has passed by a total of 70 votes with 5,366 ballots cast. We understand that the voting has ended, but it will not be certified until all of the election is certified on November 26th, next Tuesday. Upcoming meetings. There are no upcoming advisory board and commission meetings prior to the next village board meeting on December 5th, unless any special meetings happen to be called, and none are scheduled at this time. November 30th is Small Business Saturday, and I would let's remember to celebrate the independently run businesses that make up our community and make our community so special. Whether you're exploring your favorite shops, enjoying a meal at a local restaurant, or discovering new places to visit, every choice to shop or dine locally helps keep dollars in the community and shows our appreciation for the businesses that make Riverside feel like home. To further our economic efforts over the next couple of months, the Economic Development Commission will be sharing an engagement survey about resident business needs and preferences. Look for this survey in the upcoming water bill on our village website and digital platforms. Members of the commission will also be out in the community on several occasions with the survey to get brief resident feedback on how we can support and grow our local small businesses. And finally, I'd like to extend happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Please travel safe while visiting friends and family, and please enjoy your holiday. Manager Francis.
Thank you. I have a couple of items to report on this evening. I'm happy to report that the village submitted our funding request to Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. The item was discussed and reviewed by their board today, and I was notified by their leadership that their board has given the authority to execute a second amendment to our IGA with regard to the Groveland Avenue levee improvements, and they have approved the increase in their contribution to approximately $4.9 million, so the full amount that we had requested. So in total, for both MWRD's contribution, in addition to the $10 million that Army Corps will be contributing, it's nearly $15 million for that particular project, to which the village will be contributing approximately $1.6 million. Additionally, as you recall, I had mentioned that the village was notified that we would be getting $1 million for sewer separation for the Groveland area. And so in total, as we look at improvements to flooding, sewer separation, et cetera, in that area, we're looking at nearly $16 million in funding. Finally, the village offices will be closed November 28th and 29th. Garbage service will be on the holiday schedule and will be picked up on Friday, November 29th. That is all I have this evening.
Thank you, Manager Francis, and thank you for your hard work with the MWRD. This is a major achievement for the village to have this grant funding to do a project that is so very critical to our infrastructure and to our residents in that neighborhood. Resident comments on non-agenda items. Are there any residents in attendance who would like to address the board on a non-agenda item, knowing that you will have an opportunity to speak when an agenda item comes up for consideration? Yes, sir. Please approach the mic and identify yourself.
Sure, my name is Matthew Simmons. I live at 304 East Quincy. I've lived in the village for approximately 18 years, and it's a great thing that you just expressed how supporting small businesses is very important to you all. I actually have two things. One is, as I live in the town, I'm a taxpayer. I own a local towing company, and the village of Riverside, no matter how hard I fight with any chief, officer, or whatever, denies us to be able to supply the police towing services and services to the community, which we offer to the elderly residents, which would be lockouts and jump starts at our expense. The thing that we are asking for is AMJ Towing, and me being a resident and helping the police department out at times, is to be put on their rotation. If you guys have it in your time to look at all the surrounding towns, every town around here has 2 to 3 towing companies on rotation, which helps me contribute to paying their salaries. It could definitely help the community, since I'm in the community and I always have a truck at a moment's notice. Sometimes it is at my residence, and you know, we're more than willing to help the elderly, the senior citizens and stuff like that, but more importantly, the police officers that are on the front line, sitting in the middle of the road with a DUI arrest or an accident or an entrapment, and waiting for companies to come from Summit, Illinois, when I'm a resident right here in Riverside, that can respond a lot faster, that can do the same service, that has the same equipment, has the same impound yard, and is more than willing to donate services back to my community on helping the elderly and the senior citizens during the cold weather, the warm weather. And we would ask that the village would come to the top and do their homework and realize that there are many villages around that surround them that have multiple towing companies on their rotation. And in our industry, the worst thing to say, but I unfortunately I'm very blunt in front of you professionals, is sometimes it's who donates the most and who pays. And that's not right. I do pay in a way. I'm a taxpayer, and we should have more than one towing company on rotation, especially using a towing company that's not 1, but 2 towns away to respond to a police call. So I would like to ask the village if they can entertain getting some sort of police rotation and making it more fair to local businesses and local business owners. As I am a tax-paying citizen, I have helped the police department, and we do currently have police departments, and other villages have more than 1 company on rotation, which is fair. Western Springs just went down from 7 companies on rotation to 4. Brookfield has 2 companies on rotation. LaGrange Park has 3 companies on rotation. LaGrange has 2 companies on rotation. Lyons has 2 companies on rotation. And Riverside has always, in my opinion, been selfish, not entertaining that, hey, we have a local business owner in town. He is a taxpayer. He's a great citizen. He's done stuff for the elderly in the community. Always willing to donate, be part of a parade, whatever it's got to be, whatever you guys have needed as a government. We also offer free towing for municipal vehicles, free towing for fire equipment. We don't charge senior citizens when they lock their keys in their car, flat tires, jump starts, or anything. So we would ask that it could be put on the agenda or become something very serious, that the village will consider that there should be more than 1 towing company on rotation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to come out and address the board. All of our contracts, of course, are done with competitive bidding based on price and level of service. I will certainly follow up with Chief Buckley and Manager Francis to see if, to find out more about our current contract situation. So
Yes, I just want to
thank you for coming out.
I just want to let you know, Mr. President, that there is no written contract because I do business with the other company that currently does it. And all the towing, it used to be back in the 80s that there was signed contract, Mr. President, but there is no bid, there is no, let's put it out there for 20 towing companies to see if we can get the best price. It's basically, Chief, who do you want to use? Okay, that's what we're going to do. And that's where I feel that there's some prejudice, because in no town, we're also on with the village of Morris with 7 companies. There is no contract.
Well, thank you again for coming out, and I will definitely follow up with our village staff.
My second thing that I'm here for is I live at 304 East Quincy. I have pictures for the board. They were doing a railroad project right by my house, and they were shutting the road down completely. We asked repetitively, and I believe it was Assistant Manager Ashley that I talked to, and she was very tentative, she was very helpful. The property is still damaged out there, and she said that she would take care of it. The police were called, there was a record of it, they were called multiple times. I do have a picture recently of the village of Riverside shutting down my street that I can't get to my driveway. I have an elderly mother-in-law, father-in-law, I have a daughter with 2 children, and they blocked the street at Quincy and Delaplane with no notification to me. In my opinion, that's very selfish. There's only one way for me to get in my driveway. Elderly people can't come to my house. I don't want my mother-in-law or father-in-law falling or anything like that. I would ask that something be implemented by the village that there's notification that we're gonna block your street, so I can say, well, how am I gonna get to my driveway? How's my daughter gonna get in? How are my parents gonna get in who are in their 80s? How are my in-laws gonna get in? And it just seems like, again, it was very selfish because there's no notification or communication. All my phone numbers are listed with the village. A lot of people know me. I know it doesn't matter. He's retired, but the Assistant Chief Lara is my daughter-in-law's uncle, and he said, well, you gotta talk to the village, you gotta talk to the village, this is prior to retirement, because this is not the first time it happened. But the Burlington Northern thing was the worst experience I ever had. They were parking on my grass and stuff like that, and it was a blessing that this meeting happened, because I probably wouldn't have been here, because I wouldn't have known about it. But I went upstairs, and they were writing me tickets for blocking 6 inches of the sidewalk, and I got multiple pictures of them blocking my street, and I can't even access my home or my garage or my driveway since it's on the corner. So if there's something that we can come to an agreement, or maybe somebody can think of something that if this is gonna happen, I have no problem with it. I gotta be able to access my driveway though. If they're gonna tear the street up, there's nothing that anybody can do, because that's a decision, and that is improving the roads. And I appreciate that, being a citizen in Riverside. But it would be nice to have at least a week or two's notice that you might have to park somewhere else, or what can we do to be able to get you in your driveway so you can get in and out of your garage?
Thank you again, and I will ask staff to follow up and get in touch with you to make sure that kind of thing is prevented if at all possible.
Okay, thank you. And if you could follow up with the police towing, that would be great. I hope you all have an excellent holiday, and
Thank you.
stay safe and stay warm.
Thank you.
Any other resident comments on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Clerk Soul, please read the consent agenda.
Approve voucher list of bills November 21st, 2024. Approve Village Board of Trustees meeting minutes for public hearing for proposed 2025 budget for Village of Riverside and Riverside Public Library on November 7th, 2024. Approve Village Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes November 7th, 2024. Review and file board and commission minutes, Landscape Advisory Commission regular meeting, October 8th, 2024. Review and file department monthly reports, Public Works, September and October 2024, and Finance, October 2024. A resolution approving an agreement renewal with Waste Not Incorporated for food scrap composting services. Motion to approve a West Suburban Special Recreation Association Board Representative and Alternate. A resolution approving and authorizing acceptance of a 2-year contract extension between the Village of Riverside and Christopher B. Burke Engineering to perform professional engineering services as the village engineer. A resolution approving and authorizing acceptance of a proposal from Christopher B. Burke Engineering Services to perform part-time in-house engineering services for the Village of Riverside, and a resolution waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to enter into various purchase orders for fiscal year 2024.
Do any of these items need to be removed from the consent agenda? I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And seconded.
Motion and a second. Clerk Sol, please call the roll.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Marshaga?
Aye.
Trustee Mateo?
Aye.
Motion's approved, consent agenda is approved. Sesquicentennial Planning Committee update. Clerk Sol.
Good evening. I just have a quick update on activity of the Sesquicentennial Committee since I last provided an update in October. So the committee has been working with an artist and volunteer to redesign the village's flag. When I flip the slide in a couple minutes, you'll be able to see the different design concepts, the first 2 of which the committee prefers over the others, but we'll be requesting village board feedback on tonight. Also, the village-wide street sign replacement program has begun. It is expected that the majority of the first division will be completed by the end of this year, barring any more snow. In addition, the street sign auction will begin in January of 2025. And this week, the committee just kicked off the holiday street sign drawing, whereby residents and other interested individuals can purchase tickets for $5 each. And then on December 13th, the village will raffle off an East Burlington Street sign, a Riverside Road sign, and an Olmsted Road sign. In addition, the committee has finalized their 2025 event and program calendar, which they have been partnering with the Historical Commission to print. Those will be available at the 2024 Holiday Stroll for sale. They'll also be available at the library and Riverside Foods. Also, the first event for the committee will be on January 15th, 2025. This will be the opening ceremony and reception. The opening ceremony will take place outside the water tower, where the Sesquicentennial logo will be lit up on the tower, followed by a reception at the Riverside Public Library. The committee has also been working hard to publish its 2025 sponsorship program. While not yet complete, there will be a list of general sponsorship opportunities as well as for event and program-specific opportunities. It is expected that this will either be ready just prior to or just following its December 9th meeting. The committee also previously held discussions about seeking donations for a legacy or a public improvement project in honor or remembrance of the Sesquicentennial. The committee has decided to table this discussion until August of 2025 and instead focus on current fundraising efforts and on the rollout of the sponsorship program. We'll reevaluate in August, dependent on revenues. So here is the flag design concepts. Like I mentioned previously, the first 2 designs on the left-hand side are the preferred options of the committee. The other ones are just provided for context and additional options. The committee is just seeking board feedback on this tonight, but otherwise, that's all I have.
Thank you, Ethan. So they're seeking feedback in their recommendation on the flag, and their recommendation is the top and bottom one on the far left
That
of
is
us?
correct. And
Okay.
I forgot to mention that these are very preliminary design concepts, not done in professional editing software. So they'll look a lot cleaner and sharper when they are brought into that prior to being put on a flag.
And this would be adopted as the official village flag is the intention?
Yeah.
Thank you for the update. Trustees, any general comments or anything to add? Co-chairs Gallegos and Marshaws, anything you'd like to add?
You can start.
Okay. So when you look at our flag, it has letters, it has pictures, and it really looks more like a banner. Whereas if you look at the city of Chicago, if you look at other nations, those are more about colors, shapes, symbols. So when we look at the flag designs that came out from a former resident who actually did this flag as well, we want it to be more like other flags of the world. When you look at the water tower, which is the second most historic water tower in the state, that's probably the biggest icon we have in the village. It's recognizable. It's not a picture of it, it's a shape of it. Behind there is the sun. Some might even see the harvest moon. But we are a village in a forest, hence the nature, and the water is really more flowing as a river. Doesn't have the waves like you see in some of the others as depicted, and with our colors being blue, green, nature colors. This was the one that the committee chose.
Thank you.
All right, I will just say that I think it was very kind of Mr. Caden to, come forward from the community to volunteer his time and work through some concepts with us. I just only would like to say that we really do want genuine feedback on these, because we've had one flag that has taken us through a point in history, and this next flag that is selected will take us through yet another point in history. So looking at and thinking about, longevity and is it a classic design, those are the types of things that we would like to hear from you. And if you would like to see something different, or you would like us to pursue a different line of approach to developing and making this project happen, we would like that input as well.
Thank you. Trustee?
I love the design, the top left. It's just represents so much of the village. And I do appreciate the volunteer effort. It's very, very generous. I wonder if the vibe is a bit dark. I wonder if we could brighten it up a little bit. And the other thing is, I wonder if we could just I get the aesthetic of it, so I'm not asking for a ton of detail, just a little bit more detail, maybe like a bright outline somewhere, just to, put some more contrast in there around the dark parts of the negative space.
And when you say the negative space, do you
The
mean
dark
the green?
area, like the tower,
Light versus dark is more what you want to see. Darker.
a little bit more
darker and lighter being
contrast
lighter.
between the colors, yeah.
Okay.
I think you could do that with a tiny bit of detail.
Trustee Mateo, anything to add?
No.
Yeah, the top left one did strike me as harvest moon and not sunrise. So that's consistent with what Trustee Evans was saying. It's more of a nighttime shot to me. That's my initial gut reaction. But I appreciate all the work. We have two trustees missing, of course, tonight, and we would want to get their input. So I'm not sure what the committee's timing on this is, or what our timing needs to be or should be.
I don't know that the committee has a firm timeline. If we want to see kind of something differently done, we can communicate that to the artist and then bring it back to the committee level, and then ultimately bring it back to the village board for formal approval.
There were a number of designs that we were introduced to, and just to know this down took several meetings.
Yes.
So I just want to make one note. I think the group tried to utilize our branding, colors, and palette. And so if the board doesn't like how that looks or feels, providing 150 guidance on that would be helpful, but that's why you're seeing the consistent type green colors, blues, because those are part of the colors that are part of our branding.
So I will contribute that I like the upper left ones designed, but it's too dark. I agree with Trustee Evans. I think the colors below it, I'm not an artist, so.
Yeah. No, we can ask for a lighter shade.
I would ask, so given that, I would ask Manager Francis to contact Trustee Clarity and Trustee Costs and get their feedback, and then take it back to the committee and with the comments you heard tonight.
Yeah. Okay.
Very good. There's no action, go
So
ahead.
just to confirm, you want to stay consistent with the village's branding colors? Is that the
Yes.
guidance? Okay.
But I think the input was to try to make it look more
Right.
like daytime than nighttime,
Understood. Got it. Thank you.
to the extent we can do that, so. So thank you. Thanks for the work you've all put into this. There's no action to be taken, so we'll move on to the next item. Let's see, where am I? Okay, pending business. Recommended fee increases and code adjustments for fiscal year 2025. Director Zavala.
Good evening, thank you. Staff regularly evaluated fees so that the operational costs are covered and are in line with other communities. If the board elects to proceed with any of the following rate adjustments, they would go into effect January 1st of 2025. The first changes are to the zoning deposit fees. The village finds that more often than not, staff is required to bill applicants for additional incurred costs for a zoning request, no matter whether there is a successful outcome. More often than not, it's double the amount of the deposit. Residential variation request is a $1,000 deposit, and we're seeing staff is having to bill another additional $1,000 on top of that, which comes like a sticker shock to the resident requesting this. To make it more transparent, staff is requesting to increase the deposit to $2,500 for residential, commercial variation to $5,000, special use to $3,000, text amendment or subdivision $2,500. And there is an appeal process, but right now there is not a set fee for an appeal, which does incur costs as well to go throughout the process. And that is a $2,500 deposit for 2025 as well. With these increases, we are anticipating the resident will receive a refund instead of a refund of whatever's left of the deposit after expenses are paid, instead of receiving an additional bill.
Do we want to take this one at a time?
Please.
Is that, yeah, trustee,
I have a
are you concluded on this particular
Yes.
one?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Evans.
Do we know why there's been more work done, or why it's the total cost for the variations have increased over $1,000 so much? Just suddenly, like, did we increase it in 2023 to
So
2024?
we've changed how we've done things over time. There's been this evolution. There used to be a fee plus a deposit. We no longer do the fee, it's just the deposit. And then we track staff time, legal cost, mailing, publication costs, and we draw down on those balances. And so we changed, and this is all from memory, probably 3 to 5 years ago, we kind of changed to more the deposit. We've been tracking that, but the costs haven't necessarily changed. It's just been, we've just been balance billing. And there is a frustration amongst residents, business owners that are going through this process, that we're like, even though we're completely transparent when they start the process that this is a deposit, and once it is utilized, you'll be billed for any additional village resources, because you're asking for special permission, and so that, there's a cost to that. And so it's not that necessarily our costs have gone up, it's just, we've just been billing but just trying to provide a little bit more transparency as it relates to the process. So a resident really knows that it's gonna cost around $2,500. And so then they're making those thoughtful decisions as it relates to whether or not they wanna go through the zoning relief process.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this particular item is not a fee increase. People will still be paying the same. We'll just be getting the money up front rather than billing them after the fact. Any other comments on this particular item? Is there a consensus to move forward with this item?
Yes.
I'm fine with it.
Director Zavala, next.
Thank you. Certificates of occupancy and compliance. Again, with this item, staff is finding that the fee charge is not in alignment with staff time that it takes to process these requests. And their staff recommends a $25 increase for each one in 2025.
Any concerns, questions about this one? Take that as consensus to move forward.
Thank you. The same with the temporary right-of-way permits. Staff has found that this is not aligned with other permit fees in the building department and requests a $50 increase in 2025 to cover staff costs.
Also okay with that.
Okay.
Thank you. Adjustments to special event fees. When special events are held throughout the village, the party or organization hosting the event can request for police or fire personnel to be present. Village administration will also determine based on certain criteria if safety personnel is needed for the event. The current rate does not align with the salary expense of sworn police officers and fire staffing. Staff recommends increasing police staffing from $85 to $97 in 2025, and fire staffing from $25 to $79 in 2025.
I'm also fine with that.
Thank you. Staff sent out a surrounding community fee survey to gather more information on surrounding communities and what they charge for false alarm fees. And based on that survey, staff was notified that other communities have a structure where it differentiates between police calls for a false alarm and fire calls for a false alarm. The Village of Riverside's current setup is the first 3 times are waived for a false alarm call, and there's no differentiation between police or fire, and each time after that is a $50 fee up to 7 times. After the 7th time, there's possible revocation of the permit. Based on reviewing the survey, I believe it was 3 other villages are waiving the first 2 times, and they do differentiate between police and fire based on the staffing needs and what goes into that. You know, fire alarm, the fire truck, fire engines going out, and so forth. Staff recommends, based on that information, that the police single-family home for a 3rd time be increased from $50 to $100 for 2025. The fire false alarm call from $50 to $200 in 2025. And false alarm for police multifamily from $50 to $125. False alarm fee for fire multifamily, $300. And these fees are in alignment, are actually under what the other communities charge.
Questions,
That's
concerns?
recommendation, and I'm fine with that.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, after-hours water turn-on fee. If any premise located in Riverside has to have the water turned on after business hours, weekends, or holidays, the current charge is $100. The fee is not in alignment with the salary expense incurred when such events happens because water employees are under the SEIU union, and if they are called back, it's a minimum of 2 hours. And just to align the fee with the salary cost, staff is recommending after-hours water turn-on from $100 in 2024 to 2025 of $150.
Also fine with that, if that's staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. These will be incorporated in 2025, and any amendments in the ordinances will be presented.
Thank you. And just, I wanted to just kind of generally clarify what these fees are. So these are all fees that the vast majority of residents will never see. It's only when you come to the village and ask for a variation, or if you have a fire alarm that goes off, you know, it's costing the village money. And either the taxpayers are paying for it through their property tax, or the person asking for the service, specific service, is paying for it. And the philosophy of the village has always been that if you're asking for something unique like this, that to the best of our ability, you should be the one paying for it, not your neighbors. And so these fees we're updating those fees to actually cover real costs. And I know from experience that you never cover every cost, but you try to cover as much as you reasonably can. So thanks, staff, for doing this research and bringing this to us. And again, as Director Zavala said, this will come back to us as an ordinance in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a continued discussion on noise ordinance revisions. Assistant Manager Monroe.
I'm over here
You're over
today.
here.
So I'll do my best to lean over. So we have just, again, this is a continuing discussion about the possibility of a noise ordinance change. Currently, just very briefly to summarize for the public that may be joining in, the village's noise ordinances as they pertain to construction and landscaping generated sound have set hours. There are certain provisions for emergency work, those sorts of things. But the question today is whether there is both an interest in modifying those hours at all for some of that landscaping time. And as part of that conversation, we've been asked, and potentially others in the community have commented on the volume and noise generated by gas-powered landscaping equipment. And so there are communities in the region that have made efforts to modify their landscaping provisions to allow only certain types of equipment, only allow them at certain types of year, or just outright not permit gas-powered equipment. And so what we've been discussing over the last couple of meetings is whether, as an enforcement technique, the village should pursue some type of registration for the contractors that are performing landscaping activities in town. It's a mix of communities that have these landscaping technology, landscaping equipment ordinances, mix of whether they register contractors or not. It's just a matter of a different technique. And so there were comments, so that this is new again. I provided a couple of updates in the memo, but the only update I've had since that time was a comment from one of the Landscape Advisory Commission members that had said one of the ideas that spurred them to emphasize some type of list that we have of contractors that are doing this work is even for the purpose of education, and making sure that if we know who's in town, then you have an easier mechanism to communicate, either a phone number, an email address, something to provide some context. And, from a staff perspective, there are ways of continuing to pull that list, to create a list, whether we register or not. It's really just a matter of policy and whether the board would direct us to do that. So we simplified because the conversation was widespread and ultimately kind of tried to narrow down a couple of just these three questions essentially for the board to get at what we may do or not do. So the three questions, and I'll let you discuss is in order how you want. Should the village allow the use of gas-powered leaf blowers? So just broadly, and you can create any kind of connotations if you want to make a change. If gas-powered equipment should not be allowed in any form, right? Should we license commercial landscape contractors for enforcement purposes? And then lastly, depending on that conversation, should we modify our current landscaping hours? So I'll let you take the discussion as you like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll start with the first one. What are your thoughts on further regulations, banning gas-powered leaf blowers, implementing a ban over years, limiting the hours they can be used? A lot of different options there, but
I think in terms of both the incredibly high decibels of noise that these leaf blowers generate, the particulates that they push out, which are a different matter altogether from the emissions, the CO2 emissions, that there's a lot of public health reasons to be concerned about gas-powered leaf blowers. They are on the way out. They are recognized as kind of a health hazard, frankly. And it's, you know, it would behoove us, I think, to be on the front end of this movement. We're not the first, obviously. We've got some communities referenced in the packet that have enacted, you know, full-on bans. I think I like the approach of looking at it seasonally, like Glencoe does, because it is true that the technology currently, it's always evolving. Batteries are getting better and better. With the commercial equipment, it's very good right now, but it is just going to get better. We have a lot of trees in Riverside, and for spring and fall cleanups, and for emergency storm situations, I would say that the gas-powered equipment should be allowed. But I think otherwise, we, in being fair, should work towards a ban. We shouldn't ban it outright now because the businesses aren't ready. They're not that agile. They replace equipment as they can. But I think a phase out, encouraging a phase out over time to work toward an eventual ban would be the best approach. So how do we get there, I guess, is the next question. And I think working, you know, I mean, this jumps down to the contracting and enforcement, is using that as a tool, which we don't have yet budgeted. But we, again, can develop educational materials in 2025 and articulate. We could even, because we're having substantive discussions right now, we could go ahead and draft the ordinance that says its effective date will be in 2026 or 2027, you know, based on what we decide. But I think, you know, enough residents have complained about the sheer noise of it. We have far greater hours that this equipment is permitted to operate than any of our surrounding communities. I think it's like 13 hours or something like that. And for Riverside to be the most permissive of all the surrounding communities is stunning. I think for a community that's supposed to have a degree of, you know, pastoral quaintness, charm, and, you know, repose to it, to be, having 13 hours a day subject to those high decibels is a bit much. So those are my
Thank you.
opening thoughts.
So is it fair to summarize, in terms of gas-powered leaf blowers, your suggestion is that we phase them out over a course of 2 or 3 years, with exceptions for emergencies and maybe even seasonal?
Correct.
Trustees, different thoughts, agreement?
I agree with most of what my colleague said. 13 hours is a lot, but Evanston is 14 hours. Most of the others on the list are 12 hours, so it's not really standing out. I agree with the phasing out. I agree with, at least for now, allowing leaf cleanup to stay gas until such time as the technology improves and they can make that switch. I'd be curious about how Glencoe, how Oak Park, how they phase these in. What was the time until the total ban?
Yeah, I will add that I became aware in the last few weeks that there is a legislation pending in Springfield that would ban gas-powered leaf blowers. I reached out to Senator Porfirio. He said there will be no action on that in this session. So it's going, nothing is imminent by any means, and certainly no assurances whether that's going to get approved or not at any time in the future. But other trustees?
So yes, I think a gas-powered equipment ban that we phase in over 2 or 3 years would be fair and reasonable. I have a question. So, Ashley, you mentioned that we do have access to, contractor lists or lists that we could use for outreach.
Some. So we have our existing contractors that are licensed to start with. Through this research and assessing, the volume of how many people, who could we reach out to, I've created another new list of names and available websites and information. Something I gave some thought to is just a voluntary information. If people want to have us share information with their contractors, we certainly could ask for it and just say, who do you use? And then we have added additional names to that list. A simple search might also just say who's out there. We can just add them in case they do happen to be. It's not a perfect system, obviously, but it could potentially get at quite a few. I mean, we have interactions too with contractors as our inspectors are out in the field, for example. So even if we're not registering them, if we're connecting with them, we're at a adjacent house next door doing an inspection, we can certainly note who it is, and try to add that. So it would come together over time. It's not the same as requiring them to register by a certain point, but I feel comfortable starting with something like that so that we can just compile a list and engage with people if they're in the area, if that's what we want.
Yeah, I think that would be smart. I just don't want the residents to be, first of all, it can be very difficult to find a landscaper. And I know that right now people are already trying to find somebody for snow removal. So I don't want to make it difficult for residents, if they finally find a landscaper they like at the price they like, would they be in charge of telling the contractor they have to get licensed with the village? I don't know how that would work. I don't think that that's something that we should expect of a resident. I think a more organic, a list that we kind of grow on our own would be the least intrusive on residents. I mean, people hire different contractors for all sorts of reasons. I definitely wouldn't want to just have a set of licensed contractors that, and residents can only choose from them. So I think that we would need to spend more time discussing I don't know, maybe, I was thinking maybe not licensing for now and just trying to grow our list. And if we need to license in the future, we could take another look at it. And also for hours, just based on my experience of walking my dog in the evening, I think most contractors are done by around 6. I don't really hear anybody working, at 7 or 8. And so I wonder if cutting the hours to 6 really would make a big impact, sort of a suggestion. And maybe cutting the hours like from 9 to 3 on Sunday. There's no science behind this, but if we're gonna talk about decreasing hours, like there's certain things that just make sense. Nobody, like if you're sitting in your backyard on the weekends, you don't want people using their gas-powered leaf blowers, on a Sunday. So I think there's space for us to make some adjustments to the times.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I'm all for education. That's a wonderful thing to have. However, even though batteries are getting better and better, we're just not there yet. And horsepower also lacks. Commercial landscapers that I've talked to have said that they would be charging up all day long and wouldn't be able to get the workload done that they would need. So the hours that we would shorten, it would be working against itself. I don't know if 26 and 27 is too aggressive at this point. It probably is, but I would be in favor of education and just taking baby steps towards this because it's a wonderful thing. We all want a cleaner environment, but we got to be realistic about this.
So I believe I'm hearing regarding gas-powered leaf blowers that we're generally in agreement with the LAC's recommendation to consider eliminating them, right? LAC had reviewed this, correct?
Right.
And it's just, so I suppose on that one we would, and of course we have 2 trustees who aren't here who may have opinions as well. But I think that we could at least have staff draft a set of regulations that has a 2 to 4 year implementation period, something like that. And then when we have a full board, we can discuss the exact parameters of that phasing in of the ban, as well as what seasons and for how long.
Would you like more of a schedule of like 2025, education campaign, and then some monitoring pending legislation, some of those
Yeah,
different pieces
I
and
think so.
check-in points versus, I don't know if you want us to actually draft an ordinance at this point, because the other thing we have to be cognizant of is enforcement. If we're changing the hours, or any of those different pieces, enforcing, and it will be after the fact kind of enforcement, because in the moment, it's gonna be really difficult.
Doug, was there any concepts of legislation that the state was looking at for this?
I don't know, what I read and what I looked it up on the legislative website, it was just ban gas-powered leaf blowers. No qualifications or limit or anything, yeah. I mean, it struck me as someone's thrown that out there to get the discussion going at the state level.
There is, in the memo, the comments about the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus gave us word that the state IEPA was successful in getting a grant to help with the transition of some energy efficiency items. And so part of that application included assistance in transitioning and grants for contractors for larger equipment that's out there. And so we don't have the details on that program yet, but looking into next year, if the part of the effort is education in both Riverside and broadly, C4 in the region and all of these things, they're working also on these toolkits and information and getting word out to commercial workers that are doing this type of work. So we can kind of bundle all of those pieces together, both local information and our expectations, and then whatever else might be available as a resource for people as those things become available, and the funding too.
So to answer your question, Manager Francis, I guess we don't necessarily need an ordinance right away, but we need an implementation plan, so to
Yeah.
speak. But I do think that once we decide to start this education program, I would think there needs to be a date certain that we were educating people, say, hey, this is coming in 2026, 2027, you're going to have to be in compliance, but, as opposed to saying, hey, we're planning to do this, and it's a little bit more vague, so, okay, I think we have consensus on
Thank you very much.
the
I have
leaf
a question
blower.
about hours
Yeah.
for AVM Monroe. Are we getting many complaints about landscaping hours alone? Or is it usually coupled with noise?
I would say it's typically coupled with noise or, debris and leaves and other things being blown into the public right-of-way, into the street. So it's not necessarily the timing, like we don't get a complaint saying it's 8 o'clock at night, why are they blowing leaves? It's just more so that it's noisy, and the high volumes of noise are bothersome to people, or the dust that's being generated and blown around with the debris that's bothering people.
So to answer your third question, my inclination would be to keep the hours as they are, at least for now, and see how things settle out when it's quieter. But I'm one person.
How
yeah,
things
let's
settle
sk-
out when it's quieter? I don't understand that. It's not ever quiet, like, until after 8 PM.
No, I mean, when we no longer have commercial gas-powered leaf
Oh,
blowers, then it is literally quieter.
I see, okay. Yeah, we are talking about a number of things at the same time.
It does make a difference. The level of noise changes when you're using the electric versus a gas-powered equipment, for sure.
Just really quick, did we differentiate between when the residents are allowed to landscape their yards and when the contractors are? I really wouldn't want to put limitations on the residents. Most of them don't do yard work at night, but I did see somebody using an electric mower earlier this year at night. It had a light on it.
So based on how the code is currently drafted, it doesn't differentiate, but it affords that longer period. So if we're staying with the hours as recommended by Trustee Mateo, as we look at this implementation schedule, then it wouldn't impact our residents.
It says for residents only.
Yeah, I recognize that there's a typo in the question because it leaves out Saturday
Oh, it's
hours.
Sunday. That's
So
why.
Sunday is generally, it's that 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Sunday, but it's not for any contract or commercial work. So really, the only limitation or difference is that commercial work can't happen on Sundays, and residents are still able to do that.
And the reason why the code is drafted that way is the noise ordinance not only refers to landscaping activities, but construction activities. And so approximately 6 or 7 years ago, the board had a really thoughtful conversation about allowing residents, like their home on the weekends. President Pollock remembers this conversation. They had the conversation of, residents do work on the weekends. And so at that point in time, the village didn't allow residents to do work on Sundays. And so could be that residents were doing work and were in violation of the code. And so the board didn't want residents to be violating the code. And so that was where that carve out for residents only. Sorry, I thought you were referring to the Monday through Friday. My mistake.
So, going back to the second question, staff is suggesting that we've decided we're going to pursue banning gas-powered leaf blowers. So staff's suggestion is we should register landscape contractors, right? Maybe not immediately, but when that,
Yeah, we could follow either one of two paths, either proceed with some type of registration of those contractors, or defer that registration and see how enforcement goes without such a mechanism. So it's basically either or. There are parts of enforcement that would be challenging regardless of what type of registration is in place. So it's really just I think it's a policy choice.
And with registration, so if the village were to go down that path, you could do something similar that we have with our contractors' licenses, that if they violate these rules, then it's basically the 3 strikes and you're out for a period of time, and you can't do work within the village. I believe the code says either 18 or 12 months. For contractors at this point, if the board wanted to, they can mimic similar language for landscapers for that licensing process too. But it will require additional staff time and staff resources to accomplish those pieces.
any thoughts on registration?
I think we should pursue the informal, compilation of data approach and see how it works with education efforts in 2025. I think ultimately, it's probably a very good idea to have the registration, but I recognize that there's, a budgetary piece of everything that needs to happen too. So I think if we're developing a long-term action plan, essentially, to get us toward that ban, that maybe that question is revisited around, budget season during 2025 in order to plan for 2026, whether we're going to do it or not. If that makes sense, to put it in
Makes a
the
lot of
schedule.
sense. Yeah. Anyone else? Is that consensus on that item?
Yeah.
And then, do we want to just continue discussing hours, or do we want to take any immediate action on adjusting the hours? I think what I'm hearing is continue to consider it as we'll have this implementation plan sometime in the first quarter next year, I presume. And then we can, as we go further into it, we can think about that some more.
Sounds good.
Agreed?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Or Assistant Manager Francis.
I got it.
Ashley, anything else?
I know.
I avoided that earlier.
Yep, we're all set. Thank you so much, all of you. It's been a discussion. I'll return in the first part of next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Next on the agenda, turn the page. Resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement regarding maintenance and improvements to Blythe Park between Riverside School District 96 and the Village of Riverside. I did want to preface any discussion that I did get a request that this be tabled without taking any final action because we have 2 trustees absent this evening. And I think there are some details that still need to be worked out, but if there's any comments or questions you want staff to be looking at it over the course of the next few weeks, now's the time. So anything from trustees?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we, move forward with this IGA, then there will be like plans, like playground plans and things like that that'll come through here, and we'll still be able to like negotiate or say yes or no, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, so there can be certain items incorporated into the IGA, and I did speak with the superintendent today. She also provided me additional insight on their processes that they go through in order to design what they currently have at their different schools. So they do different stakeholders meetings, get feedback from families and students, create the design. One of the things I mentioned to her is the village board may want to incorporate into the intergovernmental agreement the design going through the different commissions, in addition to whatever commissions the board selects, in addition to getting approval from the board. And I had told her, I said, but that would be, staff would work with the district on that so that it's not put upon the superintendent or her team to attend all those different meetings. Additionally, so just so that the board has an idea of how their process works, it's not as if we enter into this agreement and they're building the park in 2025. They would hope that we would get certain details ironed out, that they would be able to solicit feedback, and hopefully by fall of 2025 be in a position to place the order because of the lead time that it requires to purchase certain playground equipment. But once again, soliciting the different feedback of the different individuals that the board wants involved in this particular piece. Also, if they're also looking at finalizing designs, if the board approves or wants to move forward with this agreement, then by then our park comp plan will be done. With Barry Dunn, and we'll have those results, and we'll be able to provide them that information as well. I did get a question of how old is the park, and based on some limited information that I could find in some historic files, it appears that that park's about 30 plus years old. So
The park or the equipment, or both?
the equipment, sorry.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Yeah, I would just say I was struck by how ambiguous the ownership of the land is and how broad the development rights that are being proposed to be given away, perhaps to another entity, but with ownership being unclear, we don't know. It's a big area. It's the entire area. And there's no limitations on footprint. There's no definition of anything, and there's provisions for additional structures in the future. And I just think that something that is that broad not only needs, you know, all of the commissions to weigh in on it, but it also needs public input. I think there are many potentially interested parties when you're talking about a park, an Olmsted design park within a national historic landmark. You know, we are stewards, and there are, you know, this is for all the people, not just some of the people. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point. One of the limitations on the right to build the playground, for example, is that whatever playground that the school district would build would be subject to our review and approval. So nothing would ever get built unless this body agreed to it. I mean, so all of this is doing is creating the license and the mechanism by which that if we do come to an agreement, then they have the right to actually build it. What it would look like, where it would be located, everything else is to be determined. And if and that's the feedback that I was getting. If we would like other entities or boards within the village to review this in addition to the village board, that can certainly be incorporated within this. Or even the village board could just say, you know what, we're not prepared to weigh in on this until I've heard from whatever other group. So nothing will get built unless you say that it's okay.
Yeah, the ambiguity issue of the ownership is one thing I do want to try to work with the school district to resolve, and that's another reason to table this. As far as committee review, I think the only committee or board that, besides us, that would have jurisdiction is the Parks and Rec Board, correct? Because it is a designated park already. So it would only be subject, and I think it makes good sense to send it to Parks and Rec for their input. And again, the tabling allows us to do that. So, anything else?
Well, I think this is a wonderful collaboration, and I thank all the time and people who have been involved in it. It's a new way for us to proceed, so I like the idea of it. I have told both President Pollock and Manager Francis I had some concerns. One is, we're spending over $100,000 on the park survey, and now we're just going to have D96 design a park. So would it be appropriate or possible to put any guidelines into the agreement?
Well, we're not entering into an agreement right now, and by the time, if it's gonna go through different commissions for review, it could be at that point that we have that report. Or you could say, you could put in a caveat that the village will provide the report and that there will be discussion and guidance provided for that particular playground. I mean, the IGA, we can make it whatever the board would like it to look like. And so this is just a starting point for that particular discussion for both our board. It will not go to District 96 board until our board has figured out the framework so that they can respond to it.
Well, I would like to hear from the Parks and Rec Board. I think they should have some input on it. And frankly, the idea of putting in a basketball court in green space now without getting any public input concerns me. And I don't know how best to go about getting that input or how much time to take for that. But
Beyond the Barry Dunn feedback that we've received for that the community's asking for a basketball court, or specifically to that site?
that site,
Okay.
and again, I'm just one person on the board.
I would agree with you, though.
So, I guess I would ask for a motion at this time to table this indefinitely and direct staff to move this to the Parks and Recreation Board, and perhaps even with some notice to residents in the area when the Parks and Rec Board is going to look at this.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'll make that motion. That makes sense.
I would also like the Preservation Commission to weigh in on the, potential for impact to our national landmark status.
They don't usually have jurisdiction over a park, do they, or do they?
They do not, but the board can elect to send
Board can
any
elect.
issue to whatever commissions.
Is that the only question you
or-
want them to answer, whether or not it will impact or not? Not design, not anything else, just,
Well, I think what the agreement contemplates is hardscaping in the entire area that's highlighted in Exhibit A. And that's the whole park.
Let me be clear, the licensed area is the Exhibit A, you can locate basketball court. It contemplates granting a license to locate it in there, subject to mutual approvals, but you wouldn't necessarily cover the entire area, that's just the area in which it could be located.
You wouldn't necessarily, but you could given how broad it's drafted.
Only if you agreed to. The village board has to agree to that.
I know, but should we enter into an agreement that's potentially that broad, that depends on who's sitting on this body?
So the purpose for Exhibit A and Exhibit B goes back to the ambiguity of who maintains the different property. And so that was the purpose of the green outline. That is the area that the Village of Riverside maintains. The red area is what the school district maintains. I did provide a map, and I realized that it didn't come out great. But if you notice at just south of the school, that little, if you look at the map that I gave you where the blue line is, this is technically based on title search, District 96 property. However, when you're looking at it, it is all listed as one pin, which creates the ambiguity and confusion as it relates to this particular parcel. So the purpose of the green highlighted area versus the red was to just note, Village of Riverside is responsible for the green piece, and District 96 is responsible for the red, because of the property line ambiguity and issue that we were encountering.
So these are issues that we could certainly resolve as we further work on this agreement. So I think it's fair to note that that is a concern that we would definitely address through the agreement. I think by definition, a basketball court is limited in size. It's not courts, it's one court. And so we can imagine that that basketball court is going to be roughly the size of that tennis court at most. But no reason to leave that vague. We can clarify that. So Trustee Gallegos, are you making a motion then to table it and send it to Parks and Recreation Board? Or are you including historic preservation in that?
Oh, I would think it's kind of premature to ask preservation right now any more questions about the design of it or what's going to be included. But if there's parameters they want to be followed, I think Parks and Recreation has had the discussion first. I don't think preservation would have enough to give an answer on it at that point.
I will,
If it comes back to us from Parks and Recreation, and we think that it should go to preservation, I'd be fine with that. But I think
You
right now
wanna-
it's
you wanna-
it's too early right now to ask them. But later on, I'm fine with
We
asking
have
them
a motion for-
once we have something to work with.
Either.
I will say that preservation, especially when we were going through the disc golf discussion, gave very thoughtful feedback. They did not feel as though that item was going to have an impact on our national landmark designation. And so it may be value added to get that feedback of, hey, we think it should be along this tree line. And so that may be helpful for the Parks and Rec Board, for them to give that initial prelim feedback on it, and then after something is designed, give that follow-up feedback.
Who's meeting first? Is it Parks? Who's meeting the next? Is it Parks and Recreation or is it preservation?
Parks and Recreation, I believe, had their final meeting of the year, so they won't be meeting until 2025. So I believe it's preservation, but let me check.
We didn't get the list of meetings from Doug this time, so.
It's definitely not in the next 2 weeks. So just a moment.
I'm not trying to slow this process down or even, of course, I don't want to stop it. We had some questions and I think it's fair to take a little bit of time, but I wouldn't hope that it would take a long time to get back to D96.
Looks like preservation meets December 12th.
All right, so we're going to ask them what parameters they would suggest in order to keep it within historic preservation status. Is that?
I think that would be a great idea, yeah. They've more expertise with respect to that, and I think if they were to look at the IGA, to look at the scope, and they would make recommendations that would protect the public interest, that would be helpful for us to at least consider.
Okay, then I'll amend my motion to include that question for preservation.
Okay. So the motion, just to summarize, is to table it indefinitely, and in the meantime, direct Parks and Recreation Board and Historic Preservation Commission to look at this at their very next meeting and give us feedback.
Parameters to work with,
Yeah.
to preserve historic landmarks.
Preservation would be looking at, as they always do, simply directly on impact on our landmark status, right? Yeah. Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion, any further discussion on the motion? Clerk Sol, please call the roll.
Trustee
I'm
Evans?
sorry, I didn't ask for public comment. Is there public comment on this item? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joanne Rogers. I am a 34-year resident of Riverside, and I would just encourage you, I think it's very unusual to have this kind of intergovernmental agreement where somebody else, I realize it's another public entity, but somebody else has jurisdiction over Village of Riverside land. So I think it is unique and different, and I would hate to see us repeat the mistake of not getting the input on the signs in the park that created, quite a lot of, let's just say, kerfuffle among residents who felt like they were sort of blindsided by it. And it may be that residents, look at a basketball court and improvements to the park as positive overall, especially if this board and Parks and Rec and Historic Preservation look at it. But I would solicit input from the public, however you do that, and possibly even, interested groups that work within Riverside as well, for their input and comment as well.
Thank you for that, yes. Any further discussion on the motion since I cut it short? Clerk Sol, please call the roll.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Mateo?
Aye.
Motion approved.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Just to this board, I just would like to maybe not require that the trustees who would like outside review have to press so hard to get that. I felt like if a trustee wants review from one of the commissions, then we should just be open to that, not have that person convince us why that needs to happen.
Thank you. And I did want to also add that Manager Francis and Superintendent of D96 have worked very closely together on this. And it's been a very positive relationship, and I'm sure this is something that we can get done. It's just, as always, it takes time, and it's always important to get public input, both from committees and commissions, as well as the general public, and to make sure that everything is exactly the way everybody wants it to be. So, thank you. Next on the agenda, ordinance amending various sections of Title IX of the Village Code of the Village of Riverside, Illinois, relative to parking. Director Zavala.
Thank you. Now that Lot 8 has been completed, it's come to staff's attention that there is one spot causing some confusion. If you got the laser pointer.
Yeah.
On the left-hand side, the current setup, we have commuter parking along the rail line and business parking and bank parking. This one spot is a commuter spot. It's causing confusion because the business parking patrons keep parking there, confusing it for business parking. Staff is apprehensive to rent this spot because it's an ongoing problem. It's different vehicles, different times, there's citations. I even drove past twice myself to check it out, and there's a car parked there each time. Business parking is utilized efficiently. All spots are taken. Staff is recommending to reinstate this one spot as business parking. I would hate to rent it out to a commuter and it's a full lot, and if they come into the lot and see someone's parked there, they would have to park on the street.
Thank you. So it's not currently leased to?
No, it's not. Yeah.
Trustees, any questions or issues with that?
Makes it simpler, I think.
Sure seems to make a lot of sense.
Yes, it would be full business on this side, bank parking, all commuter.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yes, yes, it does. When we passed the first ordinance to change the business parking, the layout wasn't complete yet. The project was still ongoing. We wanted to have it completed before, but it's just not working out like that. So it's better to change it and to alleviate any future confusion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this matter? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make said motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Clerk Sol.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Mateo?
Aye.
Motion's approved. Community solar discussion, Clerk Sol.
Good evening. I just wanted to provide some context to this item. This came up when when the board was discussing the renewal of the aggregation program in June of this year. The board directed staff to look further into community solar as a green electricity or sustainable energy alternative. You can see in the agenda packet that since the inception of the aggregation program in 2012, it used to be cheaper than the ComEd rate. In 2020, when the village board approved a contract for 3 years, it was a price match. And then the last 2 renewals for the aggregation program have been at a premium to the current ComEd rate. So that's kind of the context for where this discussion comes into play. So to provide a brief overview of what community solar is it just provides the opportunity for consumers to obtain the benefits of solar power without installing the panels on their home. So maybe their house has too much shade, they live in an apartment building, or they can't afford to install panels on their home. So with community solar, you don't need to install the panels. You subscribe to a portion of a community solar garden somewhere, and then you receive that benefit. So how you pay for that benefit, which is the infographic on the right, you can see without community solar that someone would just get their normal electric bill from ComEd. With community solar, residents would get two electric bills every month. You can see on the bill on the left-hand side that there is a solar credit on there for being subscribed to a community solar program. And then the bill on the right-hand side would be from the solar provider that they're subscribed to, taking away an administrative fee for handling the maintenance and improvements to the solar farm. And so the savings would be approximately 10 to 20%, depending on the solar program they're subscribed to. So that's a little bit of an overview of what community solar is. I've also kind of created a brief table on how it's different, similar to the village's aggregation program. So as you can see, aggregation programs are opt-out, meaning that when the village board approves a renewed contract for aggregation, all residents are automatically enrolled in the program, but have the ability to opt out. Whereas with community solar programs, they're legally required to be opt-in currently. So residents would have to sign up themselves, and they could sign up for any program available in the state of Illinois currently, or any solar farm that offers homeowners or tenants the ability to sign up. So the cost, as I mentioned previously, the current aggregation rate in the village is a premium to the ComEd rate. However, it is 100% green aggregation. Whereas with community solar, residents would experience a savings on their monthly electric bill. However, in terms of bills, with the aggregation program, residents still receive only 1 bill a month from ComEd. There is just a section on their electric bill for the supply portion that denotes that that supply is coming from MC squared. Whereas in a community solar program, residents would still have their normal ComEd bill with the credits for community solar on there, but then they would also receive a bill from a solar farm for their regular administrative fees. And so with aggregation, the village board approves a contract. Currently, we are in the beginning of a 1-year contract with MC squared that will expire in October. And the village board can then decide in June of 2025, if we receive bids again, to renew the program again for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or to not move forward with the aggregation program. Whereas with community solar, it would be the responsibility of residents within the village to sign contracts with a solar developer. So the village would not ever engage with a company to implement a community solar program. It would be more of an informational campaign. And then small commercial accounts are included within the village's aggregation program, whereas for community solar, they typically fall into a different category of community solar programs that are a little less available than normal residential programs for community solar. And then the last piece of information before we open this up for discussion, these are just statistics for the most recent aggregation program that the village board approved in June, and that started in October. So we had a total letter mailing of 3,893, and then we've had about a 12% opt-out rate for our residents. That is pretty similar with other aggregation programs throughout the state of Illinois, so not a big surprise there. And so the feedback that we're looking, staff is looking for from the board tonight, again, no final action, but we're looking for feedback on whether the board would like to promote community solar to residents, and if yes, would the board like to engage with a company to endorse or recommend their program, or which option B, which is what staff would recommend, would generically promote community solar and refer residents to the Citizens Utility Board's resources, which includes information on the Illinois Solar for All program as well. The second question that we would like the board to consider is whether they would like to implement both the aggregation and community solar programs simultaneously. So this is possible, this can be done. However, staff is not recommending to do this as it would be very confusing to residents. We already frequently get contacted during the aggregation renewal period from residents on how the program works and what the letter means that they got in the mail and if it's spam or not. And while we publish a great deal of information on it, we still experience a consistent lack of awareness on the program. So I'd like to just kind of open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Ethan. Trustees?
Well, Ethan, I think your chart that compared the community solar and the electric aggregation program side by side was very well done. And I think that if this was the kind of, format that was presented to our residents, that they would not be confused about it. I think it's very clear. I think it's very compelling. I have to say, after spending, a lot of time with C4 and learning about solar and aggregation, I like that Riverside had elected by referendum to, pursue sustainability strategies. Was that in 2019? I really appreciate that, and that's why this board has, over time, been pursuing the 100% green energy REC credit program on behalf of residents. That's why we're one of the, top EPA green communities in the U.S. It's really wonderful. So that aggregation, the REC credit program that allows us to do that and allows us to do that on behalf of residents based on their, requests that we do so, has really made an impact, a big environmental impact. I hate to lose the ease of administration of an aggregation program, but I also see that the increase in costs over time in that program have impacted some residents. I also see that there's some, anecdotal social media skepticism about REC credit programs, although the EPA would not be certifying those programs if there was a problem with it. So I would be interested, though, because community solar really offers the opportunity to, go with a known green, renewable form of energy that you're subscribing to and achieve savings off the ComEd rate, not to mention our higher aggregated rate. I think that if we made a careful investment in education and presented the program side by side like this, we could continue with an aggregation program and say, if you're going to opt out, whether it be for financial reasons or you like to know where your solar is coming from specifically, here's an option that will be both green and save you money. I don't like the idea of, just opening it up to residents to go, searching for the lowest cost provider, because in many cases that's, you know, powered by fossil fuels, and that defeats the whole purpose. So I think if we had an educational campaign where we're, you know, sticking with aggregation as a fallback for people who like the ease and simplicity of getting one bill, they know that the energy's green, it's just easier that way, and that's what they prefer. And then we offer the green option where they can save money, but get two bills, and they would have to deal with that and make that conscious choice. I think we can do it. So I have greater faith in our residents that they would be able to handle both together, side by side.
So I'm happy we're having this discussion, and not just because it's the third time it's been on our agenda. We're finally getting to it. Awesome. Back in June, I told President Pollock that I wanted us to talk about aggregation because the past couple of years it has gotten very expensive. The referendum approving the village to do aggregate was in 2012 and it was overwhelmingly approved. 75% of people were for it. At the same time, the rate that we got was almost half of what ComEd was. The average household saved $400 a year. It's been a long time since we've had those savings. So I want us to talk about it. I'm not sure I share your confidence. I do have a question. The 12% estimate of opt-out, do we have any idea, is that more recent or 5 years ago were that many people opting out?
It's track. I don't have the numbers on hand, but recalling from the last couple of years, I remember it being between 8 and 12%. So it's been in that range for the last few contracts.
Okay, thank you.
So my understanding is that the opt-out requirement is based on the law, a law. And I imagine it was written that way on purpose, because they want people to stay in. And we, the village, we want people to stay in. And I did see the pushback and feedback after the last round of opt-in, after the last opt-out period, and did notice misinformation, confusion, fear, distrust. And I think that the way to address that is through, better communication on the village's part. Even though it's hard, it may be really difficult to explain, but I just think we need to do better. I would like to do both. I understand that. If we are going to move away from the aggregation program, it would be nice to do both. But if we're not going to do both, then I would like to just stay where we are with the aggregation program the way it is, which encourages opt-in. And until we see, some significant pushback in the community, I don't think a 12% opt-out, if it's not like a significant jump over previous years, and it's also average, it's not much different than did you say it was like a national average or EPA average?
It's about a state average.
It's about the same?
Yeah, for the state.
For the
for
state.
aggregation programs across the state, 10 to 15% is pretty standard.
So if we can't do both, I would want to revisit maybe in like 3 years to see if more people are opting out.
And just for clarification, our consultant that we're utilizing specifically for aggregation has told us that little by little, communities are opting out from aggregation programs too. So that's just something to be cognizant of too. It's more specific to the cost that Trustee Mateo had noted. And because there are all these other options now available for residents that weren't available previously.
I recall Sharon as well saying that we were in this last cycle of aggregation contracts, Riverside was the only municipality in the state to have not gone with the ComEd price match option, which keeps you at the minimum green power percentage to stay EPA Green Power Community certified, but is not 100%, it's 25%. So Riverside was the only community that she was aware of that deviated from that to go to the 100% green, which was a premium rate to comment.
I thought we'd be a lot further in solar power than we are today, ever since I had my Texas Instruments solar calculator back in 1980-something. No, I think we could probably do both as well. I do see people wanting to not be part of the aggregation as we have other alternative sources of energy. So I think that option might be the best route to go through.
Doing both?
Yes.
So, go ahead, Mandy.
If I may, if we do go down the path of doing both, I would recommend that we amend the budget for next year, because presumably we're looking at doing this for next year, because our consultant for aggregation is only going to answer aggregation questions, and we're going to have a problem of just, because whether it's working with someone to handle the communication between the two, because we do get a lot of volume of questions just relative to the aggregation, and then you do an overlay of solar. And I don't know if it would behoove us to recommend a particular solar group, simply for the fact that we don't negotiate the contracts. And so if a resident gets into a bad agreement, and I'm not saying they would, but we have to look at it from a couple of different angles. We don't want a resident becoming upset with us because we advocated for our particular solar program. That those additional revenues, if we're doing, that additional expense that I referenced related to consultant would either be A, to help with communication, but also B, to deal with the call volume that's gonna come in, because we can barely kind of get by right now with the call volume, and Sharon Durling handles a lot of it with her team, but there are residents that come in that want to speak to someone face-to-face, make sure that this is a legitimate program. And so if we're doing this additional overlay of solar, we're going to need that additional support to make that happen.
So based on that, and based on what I'm hearing from the trustees, I'd like to suggest that we talk about this a fourth time, sometime in January or February. And in the meantime, staff answer those questions, the budget impact question of doing both, how that would be handled by staff, what the budget implication would be. And hopefully, when they bring that back, we'll have a full board. Because I'm hearing kind of not full agreement necessarily on doing both, or which, so I think it'd be prudent to have a full board to weigh in, but also we obviously need to answer the budget question before we can, at least I think that's pretty obvious that we would need to, so. Is that consensus then to bring this back after staff has had the opportunity to research the budget implications?
Yes.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Very good, thank you. Trustee reports, do we have any trustee reports this evening?
I just wanted to let everybody know that the Riverside Friends of the Library has updated the Riverside Opoly game. It is modernized, and its pre-sale is ongoing. The actual games will be ready for pickup in early December. You also can purchase that, will be able to purchase them when you visit Santa at the holiday stroll at the library. They're $30.
Thank you.
It's a terrific
Anything
Christmas
else?
present.
Any other trustee reports? We do have need for an executive session this evening to discuss the acquisition of real property. I would ask for a motion and a second to adjourn to executive
So
session.
moved?
And seconded.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. all.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.